Hi, I'm Shane Brinkman-Davis with GenUI and ImiKimi, and this is another live coding exercise. Today, I'm going to follow on what I've been doing in the past couple exercises. Last time I explored the possibility of streamlining Redux, and I really want that. So I've done some looking, and there's some different things. There's like Redux less. That does this. Redux without reducers. But I took a little look at this, and one, it's a little lacking, to put it fairly. Let's close this for a minute. Come right back to that. And here we go. Oh my gosh. JavaScript React. I am sorry for some of the background noise today. We'll see how well it gets picked up. But this is like prime time for the airplanes taking off over Lake Union, these puddle jumpers. So here we go. So this is their example for Reactless. And they have a component here. So they are doing create store, which is coming from Redux less, not from Redux. And then they have the store, and they're doing get and sets on that store. That's okay. They're also still using this mapped component solution, this is the way how the old school, the pre-hooks version of Redux was used, which personally I think was a bad decision. A decision was that Redux would come in as props to a component. And I tried that when I did my own implementation with ArtFlux and Art React. And I came to the conclusion that it's better to take that global state and import it into the local state rather than bringing it in as props. I thought that it makes a more consistent, makes components more predictable if their props are 100% exactly the props that get passed into them from their invocation in their parent render function. As opposed to this hack, which one is just convoluted. It's just every time you have a component that's using Redux, you have to wrap it in this mapped component, which then put the layer in between, and then passes the props. So you pass your props when you render this into this container, this mapped component, and then the mapped component takes props out of Redux, shoves them in, and passes it down to your final component down here at the bottom. Every single time you build a component that is dependent on Redux state, you have to do the double component wrapping, which is clunky. And I know there's tools that kind of automate this a little bit, but it's just clunky any which way you slice it. As opposed to what I think is the better solution, which is that any state that you're subscribing to from the global state should be mirrored in your own state inside your component. And I could see there's probably an argument against that in terms of like, oh, but you can mutate your own local state within your component. This is not mutatable state because it's coming from the global state. All right, I can see that argument a little bit, but it makes the rest of your app cleaner and leaner, has been my experience. And we'll sort of see that as I dive in. And in fact, that's the way how the new React Redux with hooks does it. The new system uses hooks to bring the state in, not props. So the Redux state does not come in through the props to your component, it comes in through hooks, which is effectively your local component state. So they've actually moved the direction that I prefer. So anyways, that's what these people are doing here. My problem with this is it kind of a little bit end runs the way how Redux works in terms of reducers and things. I'm actually for that to a certain extent, but it doesn't give you a whole lot of lift. You have get and sets at the top level. And I think that that's kind of clunky. I mean, it's certainly more streamlined than normal Redux, thank goodness, you know that I care about that. But I think we can do better. And I think we can do better in a way that's a little bit more, compatible with the way we'd like to think about things. So let's go back over here to my README here that I'm working on. So hooks for Redux. if you Google hooks and Redux, it ends up talking about how do you use Redux in React hooks. So I'm a little worried about using this name because it might be confusing, but what I'm saying is let's use hooks style programming for Redux. And here's why. Redux is just a global state, and hooks is just a local component state. They're both are transactional state, they're all the same thing. It's just that one of them is a global state and one of them is a local state. But the way that we interact with those is more or less identical. There's a couple little caveats. So why not use the same programming methodology? So when we can reuse conceptual, we can reuse concepts, and I don't think we're going to quite be able to use code between the two. Well, you might be able to. You might find opportunities to reuse code between the two. The more you make the system harmonious and follow similar patterns, the more you can use code to reduce across. So wouldn't it be nice if you could use the elegant syntax of React hooks when dealing with Redux? So here's what I'm thinking. This is a live code. I'm still exploring this concept, and this doesn't exist yet. I'm building it as we go. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go over here. I'm gonna grab this, which is a little example I whipped up. So first, let's just focus on the definition here of, this is basically what it would look like for you to define how you're using Redux as a state. And right now, that involves several things. You have to define this common patterns. You define these action keywords. You define your reducers. You define how you will invoke those reducers. There's a lot of boilerplate in Redux, and I'm not the only person to have observed this. But here we're going to define it all within just one file. And here we just have a simple name. But it could be a more complicated state. In fact, I would generally argue for each one of these files being more like a model in the sense that it will hold an object of keys and values. But the point is, this is very Redux-like in that you can kind of slice and dice it however you want. But it's also kind of React-like. So here's what we're looking at. So in theory, we would have this library called hooked on Redux, does not exist yet. And it would return, primarily you'd have this use Redux state. And you would invoke it just like you say use state in your component, but you would just do this at the module level. So as soon as the module loads, it's going to call use Redux state. It's going to give it its initial state. And this one we're doing strings. And then it returns, much like hooks do elsewhere, two things. It returns the second value is just an update function for updating the value, which is just like Redux elsewhere. This one's a little different in that we're not immediately rendering. So we don't immediately need this initial value, which is here. We don't need to do anything here. We're just declaring it. This happens at load time. So instead, what the first value returns is a function called subscribe to name. And that is how you will hook it into your components. And so here is what a component would look like. So a component would bring in your React, but then it would bring in from this file that we've declared, or through other ways, but basically it would ultimately come from this file, these two things, the subscribe to name and update to name, which is what we're exporting right here. And then we would say, creating our component here, using new hooks style, so it's a function, and we would just say subscribe to name. Subscribe to name can only be called from within a render function, because it's going to use React's hooks to implement itself. And what it's going to return is the current value of name right now for rendering the function. What it will further do is whenever name gets changed at the Redux level, it will trigger a re-render of this component. And then it will re-render and it will return the current value of name. So whenever name gets changed anywhere, this component will get re-rendered. And we've done all of that just with this one line. And in fact, right there, we've already closed the loop. So now, this little is the same demo component that they used over here with Redux-less. And that we have a p tag, we have a click that toggles between the two names. I used Alice and Bob. And so if the name is Alice, it becomes Bob, otherwise it's Alice. And we call it update name, which is coming from our Redux hook. Maybe this should be called Redux hooks, but Redux hooks is probably better than hooked up hooks for Redux. And I had hooked on Redux, I think was a fun plan. I think hooks for Redux is probably a better name. Naming things is tricky, folks. So it's that simple. To use it in a component, you use it in any render function, you say subscribe to name, and you're going to always get the current version, and anytime it changes, it'll re-render that component. That easy. Anytime you want to update it, you can call update here. But now, what if you want to not have the API just be so bold in the sense that any component can just wipe out the value of that state with any state they want, right? I don't have to put Alice in here. I could put an array containing, sorry, can't edit over there. I could do an array containing an object and yada, 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 right? Which would be break the whole API, but I could. So what I would suggest is that we could also have something that looks like this. So we could have, let's call it that, and then we can have const subscribe to name. Actually, we want to do update name. Subscribe to name is fine, but we can do fun stuff with that too. But we're going to do it like this. So we're going to say const update name. Yeah, we have to do it this way. Equals update name will get called with a new value, new state. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, we could do a couple different things, but let's just do it this way. Unless, if type of new state does not equal string, throw new error must be string. We'll go ahead and do this a little bit nicer, I suppose, like that. And then we can also do, and then we just say return update name new state. So there we just have a sanity check there. That just checks that it's always a string, right? So we can do something like that. I don't have any current plans to do TypeScripting here, but we certainly could TypeScript this. And that probably will come down the road. So maybe typing isn't what you're checking for because you're just checking it statically, but maybe you're checking it for a legitimate value. So it might be something more like this. If 0 is greater than Alice Bob dot index of new state. So it could be that. So that guarantees that it has to be Alice or Bob. Perhaps an even better way to do this would be this, right? Let's do up $//.test So right, it could be that. So we could say it's a string that matches Alice or Bob only. Otherwise, we can say it must be Alice or Bob. Great, we have a better validator. So we could do implement validators. We could also do something like this. So that's where we're returning update name, but we could say const toggle name. And it could be like this. So kind of want to add another option. This is something we might add as a third option, which is get name, which gets the current value of name. And so we could say something like this. Toggle name could say update name. It could have this whole implementation, right? We could have this name here. Update name, get name equals Alice or Bob. And then we could also expose this as toggle name. And that could just expose right on through to here. And then you could just have onClick be toggle name like that. So I think I might even just expose it like this for the moment. There's a bit of a question of how do you want to, we'll leave it like that for the moment. So the idea here is that this very simple interface that says get use Redux state, I also might be tempted, no, we'll leave it like this. I'll do it the way I would do it. Returns these functions for interacting with that state. Just like hooks. And it really is going to simplify the way we interact with Redux. So let's go back to this simple version here. So I think this is probably best for the doc. It just shows how simple it can be. And then this also allows us to layer a lot of stuff on top of this to build more capable code. So let's look at how we might build this thing, right? That's what we're here about. All right, so I'm going to close this out. I'm going to close this out. There's some more noise here. I apologize. Go bye-bye, welcome, thank you. So we have subscribe to, update, and I guess I really think we are going to want to have get. And that get is going to be just that simple. So update is going to take a new value. And it is going to, this is where things get a little bit tricky, right? So we need to, I think we're going to have to take, it's going to take initial state. I think it's going to have to also take a store. Because now I got to go over here and I'm still learning Redux, guys. A little bit of embarrassment. I'm trying to rewrite Redux when I'm just still learning it. But the reality is the concepts are really straightforward. And the implications of my stuff I'm adding here, I'm not quite sure about, right? But I'm trying to do something to make it better. And it's going to maybe need some iteration because I'm going to be learning. Hopefully I'll be learning from you. So get state. So this is a store, right? So you create a store with create store. And then you have these functions on this store. So I think that that's what we're going to just work on there. We're going to assume we have this store. And we're going to be able to call dispatch and subscribe and all that good stuff, right? So store. We are going to want to do an initial state here. So how do we add to the initial state? I think that create store is where you give it the initial state, right? Right, guys? So you say store reducer preloaded state, the initial state. You may optionally specify it to hide the state from the server or other things, yeah. So when we say use Redux store, we're going to wanting to set the initial state. So we're going to need to immediately call update, basically. So this is going to be called dispatch, because dispatch is how you update things. And we're going to dispatch immediately, and we're going to dispatch with, normally as an object. And we're going to need a unique dispatch that's going to trigger our reducer. So this is part of the trick, because we have to figure out how to make this automatically declare our reducers, right? So, but let's say this is going to be a work in progress. So I'm going to have something here called update reducer. And it's going to go ahead and, what do we want to do? We want to do this. We want to just pass in type in value. I guess we'll call it new state for now. So we're going to pass it like that. So this is going to be a unique name for right now. So that gets passed, that gets dispatched, right? And then we have to have this is a reducer. Figuring it out as we go. Ultimately, we presumably have the reducer, and we're going to set type and new state. And then create store, and the reducer is the reducing function, and the reducing function takes in a state and an action. So it actually is state, new state type. So one thing I think we're going to have here is we're going to have to say, we're going to have a store name, and we will automatically generate a store name if one is not provided. But this is Redux. We'll call this just a Redux store. So this will actually, we're just going to say, call this Redux store name, and so we can say if type equals Redux store name, then we're going to do our update, else we're just going to return state. And our update is going to be a new object, which is going to take the state as is, but we're also going to take Redux store name and do it with the new state. So that is basically what our reducer ends up looking like. Now, part of the magic here is we want to just hook that reducer up automatically, not manually. But maybe we'll see about that. So we will need to have something like this, right? So now we have our README here, but this is now going to actually need to take a we'll have to see about how we want to do this. I want the ability for you to specify a store and a store name manually, but I also kind of want to not have to worry about that. But I like to, since these are going to be optional params, I want to do it like this. I want you to still be able to use this interface, right? I want you to be able to just say, use Redux with an initial value, and you're good to go. So it's just like use state. If you want to, I want you to be able to then add, if you like the all uppercase way that Redux likes to look at things, so this is going to be a property on the store object. So it could be just name, right? It could be something like that. And usually Redux uses like these for actions, all uppercase actions. But right now we can just say, you can specify name there. And you could then further say what store you're using. But I would like to have what store you're using be basically automagic to a certain extent, because it's just redundant. Like generally you only have one store and you're going to use it over and over again. So that's good, but let's assume let's proceed for here. I think that there might be a separate library I want to build for this, which is basically the ability to declare your Redux store in a global space and then be able to just append reducers to it. And then this can just do this. We can say import main store. We'll have to think about that a little bit. And then from Redux registry is sort of the way I would think about it. And you would have elsewhere in your code, you would have the option to, these would be functions, I think, get main store and add reducer. But elsewhere in your code, you could say, set store, perhaps. But basically, you could, before you import anything else, you could say, all right, here's the store I want to use for my global store, and then everywhere else it says get main store from here. Probably called init main store. And then we can go down here and we can just say this equals get main store, just like that. And then we could also say down here that add reducer. And then I think that's basically it. I think that's almost the library right there. I think that will now do most of it except for subscribe. We have not done subscribe yet. So subscribe to is going to need to use it's going to need to do blah, blah. Let's go back over here, go to Store API. We're going to need to do subscribe. So subscribe looks like this. Where are you, subscribe listener? That's a change listener. It will be called anytime an action is dispatched, and some part of the state tree may potentially have changed. You may then call getState to read the current state tree inside the callback. Example, I don't understand this documentation. It's like, here's listener, right? Where are they defining what listener is? It's a function. That's helpful. Come on, people. Can you tell me what the listener looks like? Thankfully, they have an example. Examples are worth a million words, a million definitions. So we are doing subscribe. Oh, it returns an unsubscribe function. Fabulous. And handle change looks like that. And then they say store to get state like that. Okay, so what we do is we're going to do this. So we're going to say Redux store.subscribe wants to unsubscribe. We're going to go say subscribe, and we're going to subscribe to just everything. And then we are going to, actually this is going to be important here. So when this happens, we're going to do const. We're going to get state, but we're going to immediately go in and grab this. So we're going to grab the Redux store name. Again, Redux store name, we need to also have an auto assign option, which we don't currently have, but we'll add it pretty quickly. So the state, we might have state, and then we're going to say use state here. So that's the default state, but also the current state. So we don't actually even care about what the current component state is here. What we do care about is set component state. We don't even actually care about set component state. What do we need here? We need the I should probably go look how Redux React does it. Because React's Redux hooks does this already. What you can do is say use selector, and this does this. And I want to just go to the source. React's Redux, and I want to find out where is it doing that. So we'll just do a clone, because it's going to be so much easier if we just clone it. Let's do this. I want to know where they do this here. So here they're saying get selector, right? This is how use selector. Find a folder, use selector. They have a source/hook, so this is probably going to get us pretty close. Use selector. All right. Create selector hook. Function use selector invariant. Use selector with store and subscription. Okay. New subscription. Wow. Here's what I want to see. What are they doing with the store here? A subscription comes from utils subscription. They've got a lot of complexity here that I'm not really sure I care about at the moment. What I really just care about is doing the very basic here. Store. Constructor store, so we had the store, but then we need to try subscribe. What are they trying to do? This is not very clear, I must admit. What the heck they're doing there. So I'm not sure that that's going to add me a lot of help right now, because what I really want is when I'm over here in hooks land, they are doing a lot of fancy stuff here. Ooh, I might have to do a bit more research on this, guys, to figure out exactly what they're doing here. So some of this is you know what I might just do? They're already solving all these problems in a pretty nice way. And I generally like it, and it's not really a big deal. Let's just use this directly. I love it. I love it. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to go back over here to the doc, and then you're going to say use selector. And they have like an example of using selector, because again, this doc is really, really not great, because I just want to know what the API is. This is not a good definition of the API. Without a whole lot of like, this is defined in terms of that, right? So this is using TypeScript, but come on, like I need to know what a selector is in this doc, and I don't know what it is. But I believe it looks a little bit like this. So we do, so let's go back to our stuff here. So what I really want to do is, sorry, this part's not going smoothly. Again, I'm sort of learning this stuff still as we go, and this is sort of how it goes. We're going to say we're just going to close that out because that's pretty useless. Import use selector from Redux. And it's actually Redux React, right? React Redux. And so we're going to go on here, and our subscribe to function is going to say we are, I guess we're just doing result. Oh yes, so okay, my gosh, my TypeScript's terrible, guys. Function is the type, right? That's not useful to me. It's just a function, not very useful. That's where I'm running my problem. So what is use selector? But I believe it takes a function, it takes, yes, it takes a state, and then it selects takes the whole store's state, and then it returns. And what we want is store state sub Redux store name. I'm less clear on exactly what the second function does, right? The second function is optional equality function. Use the shell equal function from Redux as a equality function. Argument is like this. Thank you so much for explaining that not at all. It doesn't even say what it takes as an input, as inputs. Really not helpful API here, folks. I'm going to assume I don't need it at the moment. We'll have to come back around to that. I'm not entirely sure we will need it. So use selector. So this gets called inside React, right? So we just did use selector. And you know what? I think what we need is we do need a way to unsubscribe, but this will take care of that, right? This takes care of that for us. I think it just looks like this. The only thing we're saying is we're dealing with the selector part. Otherwise, subscribe to is just that simple. I think that's true. Great. Thank you, React Redux, for having a good implementation there. So we still need to think about this Redux registry aspect. I think the answer is to do this. So we will also return reducer. I'm not even going to call it subscribe to, I'm just going to call it subscribe. Maybe we can call it use sub. I don't want to call it use selector again because it's not you know, providing a selector. But I want to kind of use, and this is being array returns an array, so the client can use it however they want, whatever name it, whatever they want. But I think use is a good name because that's what we're already using for the rest of hooks, so it's kind of clear what you're doing. So this takes the store and it's going to read out this state from us. And our reducers is what's going to be shoving the state in there. And we're going to add this reducer if we have the Redux registry. So that's really the bit of the question of how do we do that still? Are we going to require the Redux registry, or are we going to let people? I really don't want to force people to have to manually add their reducers altogether. I think that's where Redux really falls on its face. In terms of just unnecessary complexity. But then, like, all of these are really simple, right? They're so simple, it's almost hilarious. I'm gonna put this down below the end of them. I mean, I guess I'll have them defined separately out here, but they are, reducer is the only one that's marginally complicated. So we have a dispatch, our use subscription calls use selector. The update actually invokes a dispatch, which says that we're just sending it the actual name of what's in the store, for that's our trigger, and we're passing them the new state. Our actual reducer is then going to say, return this state directly. And JavaScript, just JavaScript. Question mark colon's kind of ugly syntax, but it works. So if the type is the Redux store name, then we're going to immediately apply it. Let's do our automatic Redux store name. we're just going to call it So I'm just looking over here at this thing that's already called the React hooks, and like 11 people are using it. Just React hooks for Redux state and dispatch. Render provider, store, app, and then what are we doing down here? Use the store hooks as a replacement for map state, blah, blah, blah. So we say use store state name teams. Well, part of this is this is going to cause the function to re-render. Like this implementation, I believe, is going to, it just puts one big function, use store, around the entire Redux store. And that's okay. But I think that one thing is it will trigger a re-render of all op components. Published a year ago. And it's like terribly, like this is the person's API. It's like, this, we will do better doc. I think I'll probably be staying for hooks for Redux. Like that. So it's just going to add us a unique number each time. And so we can just say, if not Redux store name, I kind of like this a little bit better, so we'll do that like this. Just because then we can say Redux store equals Is it any better? I'm not sure it really is. So we could just say that. We can say like that. So now we have a unique store name that gets generated for us. I think probably good practice would be to actually always provide a store name. So maybe I might even make that a requirement, because that'll just allow, this is just going to be kind of ugly, right, folks? You're going to try to look at examine your store, and you're not going to be able to, I don't know. But on the other hand, I've been kind of actually wondering how React, I get React and Redux confused so often, how React handles this, right? How does React handle they have an inspector to inspect components, but now you have hooks state. The state is not named. There's no naming of the state when you use a hook. And given that, when you inspect the state of an object, what does it tell you about it? How do you know what the state is called? Unless they're doing some type of terrible source inspection to try to extract a name from your source, where you're not actually just explicitly specifying a source, a name. And maybe they're doing that. They seem to be willing to do that sort of thing. I think that's terrible, terribly brittle. Anyway, neither here nor there. So this is looking good. I like the way this is working. I still haven't decided if I'm going to build this Redux registry or not to make it automatically make you a store and use that store. The key thing is this add reducer, right? I guess kind of what I feel is this. So I guess we'll just call it get store. I think we'll just say get store, and we'll also have a init store, but we're not going to be calling that right here. But I think we'll say get store. And right here, we'll say if dot add reducer, then call it. So it will use this Redux registry option by default if you don't provide anything. But if you do provide something, you can provide just a plain Jane React store, in which case it will not call add reducer, and you'll have to add in the reducers yourself. I guess that's a little bit of a catch-22, right? Because you have to create the store, you have to pass the reducers in to create the store. But this assumes the store already exists. So yeah, I think you probably need to have a store registry in order to make this make sense, which I'm generally okay with. I think that that's not a bad thing. And all the store registry is doing is just allowing us to have a, in fact, maybe that's what it is. That's all it really is. We do have to have access to the store, right? So we have to get the store from somewhere, and we want to be able to add reducers. Those could be two different things. We'd have a reducer that lets you add reducers. That could just be a special kind of reducer. That's pretty straightforward. Or we could also have a Redux. And we also need somehow to be able to automatically get access to your store so that you don't have to do it manually all over the place. So I'm thinking along those lines. I think I probably will do this Redux registry. Add reducers on the fly. Who has an answer for that? Recipes, that's just a recipe. To code split with Redux, we want to be able to dynamically add reducers to the store. All right, so yes, so they want to be able to split it into multiple things that are dynamically loaded, so you have to be able to add reducers live. However, Redux really owns only a single root reducer function. This function is normally generated by calling combined reducers. Basic principle, using replace reducer. The Redux store exposes a replace reducer function which replaces the current active root reducer function with a new root reducer function. Calling it will swap the internal reducer function's reference and dispatch an action to help any newly added slice reducers initialize themselves. So, reducer injection approaches. So let's go through, but I think the option is sort of suggesting itself. We have to be able to get the current reducer. Can we get the current reducer from the store? So we'll create the store here. Inject reducer. Is making a list of async reducers here, but it's replacing the store with create reducer. Like there. Why didn't they make that a library? But that's exactly what we are talking about doing right there. and it's doing combined reducers. I should look up what combined reducers is doing. I thought it would have brought in a array, but instead it brings in an object. So I need to double check that. And this is getting towards the end of this screencast for now. It's live coding. But look, they're doing exactly what I want to do. So I think that I still might make a library for this, because it really should be standardized. We should use a standardized library for this rather than making it ad hoc every time. But let's see, since they suggest calling it inject reducer, let's see if there's an NPM that it does this. Wow, 3 a week. So this person, inject Redux reducers in an HOC way. Anyone know what HOC stands for? What the heck is HOC? It's an acronym for Higher Order Calculator. I'm not sure that's what they meant. Yeah, this is not what they mean. So that doesn't really answer that question. Redux injector, that looks like it might be the right thing. Create inject store. And then we create it, we have a store. And then from the store, is that what they're implementing? Injecting a new reducer. So yeah, that's not. This might be the right answer, right? So this might be the best choice, although, I don't know, that might be a reasonable choice. I think that sort of does what this does. With the one caveat that I still want to have a standardized store. I want a way that you, when you're using this library, you don't have to even think about creating a store. I don't think that there's any real need for that. I think that this would work just smoothly without it. So I'm going to have to go play around with that a little bit and come back with the next iteration for you guys. But I think that that is a doable thing. I think that we will use that, and the only thing that we're adding is an automatically defined store. But we'll still have this where you can pass it if you want to, but I think that this is the way I like to say is the best way to use this library, is that you're always going to say, use Redux state, you give the, probably, I'm seriously considering that we probably should have the name of your store as part of this required. So you always want to do things. You always have the initial state and the name of the store as part of the functions for Redux state, because I think it's just going to make inspection much, much nicer. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. So I know this is still hand-wavy, and I'm sorry for that. I think my next plan is when I come back around to this, I'm going to have something that's a little bit working, and we might live code it a little bit further along, but I want to get a framework in place with some tests in place and some of those other things. And maybe I'll live code those. We'll see if I get a chance to do that. But certainly let me know what you think about this. It looks like a few other people take some stabs at this, but have kind of failed. And so I'm curious how to get beyond that. So if we implement this, it'd be great to have it become sort of standard, because I think this is what we need. I think this makes it so easy to do some good Redux stuff with way, way, way less code, right? Because it's this simple to define it. In fact, I'm really tempted to do a step simpler. Like what I kind of would like to do is I'd like to say this. Can I do that? Does JavaScript allow that? You certainly can do that with with common.js, which is what I would like. But I kind of like that idea of doing that. In fact, I would kind of like to say star. Although in this case, like we made our own custom effectively reducers, right? We made our own custom reducers and we export them for like toggle name. And I like that a lot. I think that's a really good pattern. So I may say that this is still sort of a suggested pattern. Anyway, neither here nor there. So I guess the main thing is I would like to know, will this cover people's normal uses of Redux? It seems like it will. Like you have a high level thing. In this case, it's just this file. You just access name.js and you have access to being able to subscribe to that state or update that state. And this file itself could define a more comprehensive API to updating and guaranteeing correctness and whatever else, or it can just expose this minimal API to the rest of the app. And it goes through Redux, it gets all the benefits of Redux, and so yeah, it seems like that's pretty good. It seems like that should be able to pretty much handle anything you want. I have an inclination of building a library on top of this, which I would call modeled Redux, which allows you to sort of basically define a model, and a model is basically an object with a set of fields that you can define in a very declarative way. Like, here's my fields, here's their types, perhaps a little TypeScript plus with a more dynamic typing option, and here's their preprocessors. Here, you just define the whole thing as sort of in declarative field format, and including updates and functions, and you can do it in a way that's very declarative, as opposed to reducers, which is very non-declarative, which I think is kind of ironic since it's a pure functional system, but it's a very non-declarative way. It's a very imperative way to do it within a functional system. It's not very declarative. So, what do you think? Certainly, high level, do you care? Second level, do you think that this? Do you think this will reduce code, and will this work for your code? So let me know. Send me comments. Give me feedback. I'm going to try to solicit some feedback from the other people here at GenUI, we got lots of people who develop with React here and Redux, and try to get their feedback for iterating it to make it more applicable to general purpose projects. But I think this looks really good. So I'm Shane Brinkman-Davis once again. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more of these. I'm going to continue being working on this project and other projects, trying to get one of these up once a week. And I'm working here at GenUI. It's a great place for consulting for basically any sort of front-end application design, and we do back-end stuff as well, but our expertise, I think, is more on the front-end first, I guess I should say. We got good back-end expertise, but we sort of drive from the user interface back. That's why we're Gen UI. And then also my company, Imikimi, and of course my projects, which we talk about sometimes, but not too much today, is Art Suite. We did mention Art Flux and Art React. That's part of Art Suite, which is an end-to-end solution for building apps as quickly as possible with as little code as possible. And I love it. It's already great. I'm using it in production. And also Caffeine Script, which we are not using at all today, but Caffeine Script would, of course, have done all this in a third of the code. That's what Caffeine Script does. It's JavaScript in a third of the code, but that's for another thing, another topic, another day. So thank you all for checking this out, and I will see you next time. And, I like this. This is fun, and I'm doing this particular project right now because I need it, and I hope that you need it too, and I hope that we can make it work. Cheers.